having established the divine council exists, you might be wondering about Satan, or Lucifer. I mentioned at the beginning that he did not wage a war in heaven with a bunch of other angels, or at least not at the beginning of time like you might think from Paradise Lost. So who is Satan? Is he a divine council member, or an angel? The answer is yes, and you've read about him, but in modernity, you might have thought he was a snake. For a whole lot of context on Genesis 3, see my interview on Eden with my friend Curious Christianity on my channel. For now, I'm going to give you the fast version, focusing on the serpent in the garden. An important note that I'm not going to dive too deeply into is that Eden is not just a garden, but also a mountain. Suffice it to say that in ancient Near Eastern literature, the presence of God is always associated with mountains, height, and the north. Verses in the Bible, such as Ezekiel 28, call the garden of God also God's holy mountain. In ancient spiritual contexts, mountains were where God was present, but also his divine cohorts. Both the angels and the people in the Garden of Eden had free will and would make decisions that affect the rest of the story. While the serpent in Genesis 3 is indeed represented by a serpent, no ancient Hebrew reader or author would have thought that it was a literal talking serpent. First of all, as I just said, we're in the mountain of God, so the ancient reader would expect to find divine beings there. If they hear another entity talking to Eve, they would assume it to be a divine being. So why is it called a snake? Well, it's both metaphorical and symbolic in the story. In the first sense, it resembles an actual serpent, and the author uses imagery of it crawling on its belly as a punishment as part of that metaphor. But not only this, but the word seraph, which is commonly associated with angelic beings, is used to refer to the fiery serpent that Moses puts up on a pole in Numbers 21. In the same passage, the author uses the word nahash to refer to the serpent. Serpents and divine beings are often associated with one another. Additionally, we have discovered ancient Phoenician seals that depict seraphim, and they are shown as serpents with wings. So this serpentine and divine symbology is everywhere, but it goes even deeper. Remember how I said that Hebrew had no vowels? Well, if you remove the vowels from nahash, then you get nchsh, the original word. It can also be rendered with the O and E vowels, which would be nohesh, which means diviner. Further, if nahash is used as an adjective, it could refer to bronze or copper, and shining like bronze is another common divine attribute found in the Bible. Michael Heiser sees this as a triple entendre. The author is using metaphorical language regarding the serpent in one of these ways, and if it's intentional, then he could be using it in all of these ways to invoke divine symbology in the mind of the readers. The point they're making is this: the serpent that tempts Eve in the garden is one of the divine beings. The Bible heavily supports this. Let's spend more time in Ezekiel 28. Verse 12, "You were the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, and crafted in gold were your settings and your engravings. On the day that you were created, they were prepared. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. In the midst of the stones of fire you walked. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created till unrighteousness was found in you. In the absence of your trade, you were filled with the violence in your midst, and you sinned. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God. And I destroyed you, O guardian cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. I cast you to the ground. I exposed you before kings, to feast their eyes on you. By the multitude of your iniquities, in the unrighteousness of your trade, you profaned your sanctuaries. So I brought fire from your midst, and it consumed you. And I turned you to ashes on the earth." Here, God is lamenting the sin of the king of Tyre, but he uses some interesting metaphorical language, comparing him to a being that was in Eden, the garden of God, and who was an anointed guardian cherub. He was blameless until he was filled with pride and corrupted his wisdom, after which he was cast to the ground, exactly what happens to the serpent in Genesis 3. So the serpent was a guardian cherubim in Eden. Cherubim is another word for angelic beings, specifically the ones that Ezekiel sees at the beginning of his book, with the rings and eyes, the ones that we often talk about as biblically accurate angels, and the ones who are molded on top of the Ark of the Covenant. For further knowledge of this cherub's fall, we can go to Isaiah 14. This is the famous passage where the name Lucifer is derived from, and this passage was always historically associated with Satan. Verse 12, "How you are fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit in the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit." You'll recognize the expression morning stars from the Job passage about divine beings, but the word is actually different here. It's Hallel ben Zachar, which literally means shining one, son of the dawn. The word shining one, when translated into Latin, is the word Lucifer, which is where this word comes from. So it's important to note that Lucifer was never Satan's name, just a Latin word that means shining one. This is also likely not Satan's angelic name, because shining one or bright and shining star terminology is universally applied to all divine beings in the Bible. We do not get a distinct name in the Bible for this divine being until he is referred to as the Satan later on. In any event, this first traitor, as shown in Ezekiel and Isaiah, fell from the heavenly host for transgression against God, and is thrown to earth or to Sheol, which is a Hebrew term referring to the realm of the dead. So we have Satan being thrown down from the divine council, but no other angelic beings. The rest of the divine council seems to remain intact until some more rebels fail their next assignment. This divine transgression is what causes the great flood of Noah.